My brother spent 3 years in therapy figuring out who ruined his life. Turns out the answer was me, a 6-year-old who had the audacity to be born. Part 1. The meeting at the park. My brother asked for a serious conversation 3 weeks ago. Those words, serious conversation, have carried weight in our family since we were kids. They meant something was wrong. They meant someone was in trouble. They meant you should brace yourself. I agreed to meet him at a park near our parents' house. Neutral territory, I thought. Somewhere public, somewhere calm. He arrived before me, sitting on a bench with the particular stillness of a person who has been rehearsing something for a long time. Let me back up and give you the picture. I'm 27. My brother is 33. We grew up in the same house, with the same 2 parents, in the same mid-sized city where nothing much happened and everyone knew each other's business eventually. Our dad worked in logistics, long hours, early mornings, home by dinner if the route cooperated. Our mother worked part-time at a dental office until we were both in school, then full-time after. They were not wealthy people. They were not cruel people. They were tired people doing their best with the tools available to them, which is what most parents are when you look at them honestly. I finished my engineering degree at 24. Worked entry-level positions, lived in an apartment with 2 roommates to cut costs, put away what I could. Last year, at 26, I bought a 1-bedroom apartment in another city where my job took me. It's modest. It's mine. It represents about 5 years of disciplined saving and sacrifice, which I say not for credit, but because it matters to what comes next. My brother dropped out of college twice, once at 19, once at 22 when he re-enrolled. He's held roughly a dozen jobs since then: retail, warehousing, a brief attempt at freelance graphic design, a stint doing delivery work. None of them lasted. He currently lives with our parents, at 33, with no savings and no stable income. He's been in therapy for 3 years, which I genuinely respect. Seeking help takes courage. The willingness to examine yourself is something I admire. Here is what he said to me on that bench. I've been doing a lot of work in therapy. Real work, not just venting, but actually understanding the root causes of my problems. And I've finally understood what happened to me. What happened to us. I waited. Our parents psychologically damaged me. Not on purpose, maybe. But damage doesn't require intent. From the time you were born, and I was 6, they started comparing me to you. Everything I did got measured against what you might do someday. My report cards weren't about my progress. They were about how I measured up to your potential. When I made mistakes, they were catastrophes. When you made mistakes, they were just mistakes. I grew up feeling like I was fundamentally less than. Less intelligent, less worthy, less loved. That feeling became my operating system. I listened. I did not interrupt. My depression, my anxiety, my inability to hold jobs or sustain relationships. These aren't character flaws. They're the natural outcomes of a childhood that told me, repeatedly, that I wasn't enough. That someone else, someone right in the same house, was the standard I'd never meet. And the standard had a face. The standard was you. He paused. Looked at me directly. I'm not saying it's your fault you were born. I'm not saying you asked for this. But you benefited from a dynamic that destroyed me. Your confidence, your career, your apartment, they exist because you were given a psychological foundation that I was denied. I want compensation. $50,000 or half the value of your apartment, whichever is less. It covers my ongoing therapy costs and gives me a foundation to start building something. I sat with that for a moment. He says I ruined his psyche by existing while he was compared to me. But I was 6 years younger. I didn't ask for comparisons, didn't create them, didn't even understand them. I was just a kid. How does being a kid create a debt to my older brother? I didn't say that yet. I asked him to help me understand the logic. If our parents made these comparisons, I said carefully, why is the debt owed to you by me rather than by them? His answer was immediate, as if he'd prepared for it. Because they don't have money. You do. And you're the one who benefited. Part 2. What the records say. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I asked for time to think, and I used that time to do something I probably should have done years ago. I actually investigated the narrative. I want to be fair here. I have to acknowledge something uncomfortable. If I was the favored child, I might not have noticed it. That's how privilege works. It's invisible to the people who have it. The water doesn't know it's warm. So I tried to approach this investigation with genuine openness. Maybe my brother was right. Maybe my memories were sanitized by a childhood that served me. Maybe the comfort I remember was purchased at his expense, and I was simply too sheltered to see the cost. I started with my aunt, my mother's older sister, who spent a lot of time at our house when we were young. She's practical and honest in the way older women who've seen real hardship tend to be. She doesn't perform emotions she doesn't feel. I explained the situation without loading it, and asked her what she remembered about our childhood dynamic. She was quiet for a moment. Then, your parents were hard on both of you, but in different ways. Your brother got more freedom because he was older, later curfews, less supervision, more room to make his own decisions. You got more structure because they'd already learned some hard lessons with him. He had years of childhood without you in the picture at all. You only knew the family that included him. I don't remember you being a golden child. I remember you being a quieter child. His narrative: he was constantly criticized, I was constantly praised. But my aunt remembers differently. Teachers' notes show he was disruptive before I was even in school. My mom says he was challenging from age 3. Maybe the story is more complex than golden child versus scapegoat. Maybe temperament mattered too. The school records were illuminating in a way I hadn't expected. My parents are pack rats, boxes in their garage that haven't been opened in 2 decades. With my mother's permission, I went through them on a Sunday afternoon. I found report cards. My brother's, from elementary school, before I was even old enough to attend school with him. The comments read like a pattern: bright but doesn't apply himself. Disrupts class. Needs to focus. Strong potential, inconsistent effort. My own, from later years: works hard. Follows instructions. Good student. Contributes positively. Here's what I kept thinking about. Those comments about my brother were written when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. When I was not yet a standard to be compared against. When our parents had no golden child, just one child who was, according to his teachers, bright but difficult. The disruption preceded my arrival. The pattern preceded the comparison. This doesn't mean the comparisons didn't happen. They probably did. Parents say stupid, tired things when they're frustrated. Why can't you be more like your brother? I can imagine my mother saying that in exhaustion. I can imagine it landing like a blade. I can imagine my brother carrying that blade for 30 years, turning it over in his hands, trying to understand how he got cut. But did I give my parents that blade? Or did I just exist while they were already holding it? I talked to my mother. It was one of the harder conversations I've had with her, because she loves my brother genuinely, and the idea that she damaged him is not something she can hold easily. Was I the favorite? I asked her directly. She was quiet for a long time. I love you both the same. But you were easier. Your brother challenged everything from the time he could speak: arguments, tantrums, refusing to do what was asked. We spent more energy on him because he needed more. I think maybe he experienced that as negative attention, as criticism, because so much of our interaction was us trying to redirect him. And then you came along, and you were calmer, and our interactions with you were smoother, and maybe he saw that smoothness as love and our friction with him as rejection. But it wasn't. It was just exhaustion. It was us trying to keep everything together. She paused. Did we say stupid things? Probably. Did we compare you sometimes? I'm sure. We shouldn't have. But we weren't trying to crush him. We were just tired people trying to raise 2 children, and one of them made it harder. I don't know if that's our fault or his nature or something in between. I've thought about it a lot. Part 3. The debt that doesn't add up. I came back to my brother with what I'd found. Not to accuse him. Not to dismantle his narrative. But because I thought, naively, that complexity might be welcome. That a fuller picture might release some of the pressure he was carrying. It didn't. If anything, it made him angrier. You're doing exactly what you always did, he said. Invalidating my experience. Finding reasons why my pain isn't real. You went to our aunt, to our parents, to old report cards, everyone who might defend the family's reputation, and you came back with, actually, you were just difficult. Do you hear yourself? You're doing the same thing they always did. Telling me my perception is wrong. Telling me I misread my own childhood. I heard him, and I sat with a genuine possibility that he was right, that I was doing something defensive, something self-serving, digging through boxes to find exoneration rather than truth. That's possible. I can't rule it out entirely. But here's where I couldn't follow him anymore. He wants $70,000, $15,000 for actual therapy, $55,000 for lost opportunities. But the lost opportunities are a fantasy alternative life he imagines he would have lived with different childhood. I'm supposed to pay for an imaginary career in an imaginary timeline where he had imaginary confidence. That's not a debt, That's fiction with a price tag. When I finally got him to break down the number, it looked like this: approximately $15,000 in actual therapy costs over 3 years, which I can trace to real invoices. And $55,000 representing what he believes he would have earned, the career he would have had, the savings he would have accumulated, the life he would have built, if his childhood had been different. If I, or our parents, or the comparison dynamic, hadn't damaged his foundation. I asked him to walk me through the math. He couldn't. Not because he was being dishonest. I believe he genuinely has this number in his mind and genuinely believes it represents something real. But the calculation requires assuming a specific alternative version of his life, a version where his choices, dropping out of college twice, the job losses, the relationship failures, all go differently. And the causal link between my childhood existence and every adult decision he's made over 15 years is not a line I can trace, even trying hard to be fair to him. I asked for one specific thing I prevented him from doing. He couldn't name anything. Just general psychological damage that made everything harder. So there's no concrete harm, just a feeling that his life would be better if I'd been different. Feelings don't generate invoices. Vague suffering doesn't create property claims. When I pressed, gently I thought, for one concrete example, one specific opportunity he was denied because of me specifically, he couldn't produce it. And I need to say this carefully, because I don't want to minimize his pain. The absence of a specific example doesn't mean his pain isn't real. It is real. I can see it on him. I can hear it in his voice. 3 years of therapy, genuine work, genuine suffering. None of that is fabricated. But real pain and a legitimate debt are different things. You can be genuinely hurting without being owed money by the person you're hurting next to. I tried this on him. What does your therapist actually say? Not validate my feelings. Does she say I owe you compensation? Does she say that's a therapeutic recommendation? He became vague. She validates my experiences. She agrees that my childhood trauma shaped my adult outcomes. His therapist validates his experiences. Therapists validate feelings, that's their job. But validation isn't a legal finding. You feel damaged isn't the same as your brother caused it and owes compensation. Therapy processes pain. It doesn't assign financial liability to siblings. I am not being dismissive of his therapy. I'm not saying his therapist is wrong to validate what he feels. I'm saying that the step from you feel damaged by your childhood dynamic to your younger brother owes you $70,000 is a step his therapist almost certainly did not take. That step is his own construction. And it's a construction I can't fund, not because I don't care about him, but because participating in it would be dishonest. Update 1. The conversation that ended things. 2 weeks after that second meeting, we spoke again. This time on the phone, he'd said he wanted to give me one more chance to do the right thing before making decisions about our relationship. I tried one more approach. I tried to separate his pain from his claim. I believe your childhood was harder than you deserved, I said. I believe the comparisons hurt you. I believe you carry real damage from real experiences. I'm not disputing any of that. What I'm disputing is the idea that I'm the responsible party, that my success is built on your stolen opportunities, that my apartment exists because of your suffering, that I owe you money for a childhood neither of us controlled. He was quiet on the line. I was a child in the same family, I continued. 6 years younger, trying to navigate the same parents, the same household, the same pressures. I don't remember a golden childhood. I remember working hard because I was afraid of disappointing people. I remember feeling like I had to earn every good grade because the bar kept rising. Maybe that pressure came from a different direction than yours. But I was not lounging in comfort while you suffered. I was also a kid, doing what kids do, which is survive. He's been an adult for 15 years. Dropped out of college twice. Multiple failed jobs. Living with parents at 33. At what point do adult choices become adult responsibility? He wants childhood to explain everything forever. But 15 years of adult decisions happen too. Those are his, not mine. I also need to say something you won't like, I told him. At some point, not at 18 because I understand trauma persists, but at some point across 15 years of adult life, your choices have to belong to you. You dropped out twice. I didn't do that. You've lost jobs. I didn't cause that. At what point does your adult life become your adult responsibility, even if the foundation was cracked? Because a cracked foundation doesn't make every wall that falls my fault. He exploded. You don't understand trauma. You don't understand what it's like to operate from a destroyed foundation. You can say, make better choices because you had choices. I was operating with a psychology that was already broken. You had options and I had rubble, and you're going to stand there and tell me to choose better from the rubble. His pain was so loud and so real that I had to stop myself from simply giving in. Because I almost did. In that moment, I almost said, fine, take the money, take whatever, just let this be over. That's the power of visible suffering versus invisible principle. His anguish was something I could see and hear. My clarity about what I didn't owe was just a quiet internal knowing that produced nothing dramatic. But I held my ground. I hear your pain, I said. I believe it. I just can't pay it. Not because I don't care, but because paying it would mean agreeing that I owe it. And I don't. I was a child. I didn't design our family. If our parents harmed you, your grief is with them. I'm sorry they don't have the money to address it. But I can't be the surrogate for their failures just because I'm the one who made something of myself. If you don't acknowledge what was done to me with money, he said, you're proving that I never mattered. That money is more important to you than I am. That you'd rather keep property than keep your brother. He said I was never his brother if I can't pay him. But I was always his brother. I just can't be his debtor. He needed a villain more than he needed a sibling. I can't be both. So he chose villain. That was his choice, not mine. My apartment didn't make that choice. He did. I'd rather keep you than the apartment, I told him. But I won't buy a version of you that only exists if I agree I damaged you. That's not buying a brother. That's paying a ransom for something that should be free. He hung up. Update 2. The family fracture. The month after that phone call was the kind of quiet that precedes weather. My brother told the family his version of events before I could say anything. His version: he'd come to me with serious pain rooted in serious childhood trauma, and I had dismissed him, refused to engage with his suffering, and chosen money over family. Several relatives, an uncle on my father's side, a cousin I'd been close to, reached out to express concern. Concern for him, implicitly critical of me. One cousin's text: I know it's complicated, but I think he's really hurting and you could do something to help. Even a small amount would be a gesture. I thought about how to respond to that. A small amount would be a gesture, that's true. But a gesture toward what? Toward the validity of the claim? Toward the principle that I owe him anything? Even $1,000 would be an acknowledgement that his logic has merit. It doesn't. And once you establish that merit with $1,000, the number isn't what gets challenged next time. My parents were in the worst position. My father was quiet about it. He has a way of going very still when he's holding something complicated. My mother cried once on the phone with me. Not because she thought I was wrong, I don't think, but because watching your children turn into strangers is a particular kind of grief that has no clean resolution. He's not a bad person, she said. He's hurting. I know, I said. I've never called him a bad person. He really believes what he's saying. I know that too. That's what makes it so hard. She asked if there was any way to meet in the middle. I told her the only middle he'd accept was my acknowledging that I owe him something, and I can't do that honestly. She went quiet. This is the thing nobody talks about when they talk about family conflicts. Sometimes both things are true. Sometimes a person can be genuinely suffering and directing that suffering at the wrong target. My brother is not inventing his pain. His pain is real. His depression is real. His anxiety is real. The difficulty he's at building a life is real. What isn't real is the causal chain that ends at my front door. But you cannot say that in a family meeting without sounding like a monster. You cannot hold a nuanced position against someone else's open wound. I started therapy of my own around this time. Not because I thought I'd done something wrong, but because I needed help carrying the complexity. A person I trusted outside the family to help me hold two truths at once: that my brother may have experienced something genuinely painful, and that his pain is not my debt. My therapist, and I note this specifically, unlike my brother's situation, never told me what conclusion to reach. She helped me examine my own childhood memories with rigor. Was I the favorite? Maybe differently than I understood, she said. Being praised can create its own pressures. Being the easy child can mean your needs are underserved too, just invisibly. She helped me sit with the uncertainty without needing to resolve it into a clean verdict. I don't know with certainty that my childhood was as equal as I remember it. But I also don't know with certainty that it was as unequal as my brother claims. What I know is that neither uncertainty obligates me to pay. Update 3. A year of silence. A year has passed. My brother hasn't spoken to me directly since that phone call. He communicates his position through the family ecosystem, through things my mother mentions carefully, through his visible absence from events where I'm present. Christmas was the first test. He came to our parents' house for Christmas Eve. I came Christmas Day. The solution my parents arrived at without anyone proposing it formally. Two separate holidays carved out of one family to keep a peace that doesn't quite exist. From what I hear through my mother, carefully, never pressuring me with it, he's still in therapy. Still unemployed, still living at home. His narrative has not changed. In his telling, I'm still the figure who benefited from his destruction and refused to make it right. I imagine that narrative is painful to carry. I imagine that being the hero of a story where you're perpetually wronged and the world refuses to acknowledge it is an exhausting way to live. I don't say that with contempt. I say it with something closer to grief. Because here's what I've arrived at after a year of processing. My brother may have experienced something real in our childhood that shaped him in ways I can't fully see. Our parents, imperfect and tired and doing their best, may have said things and done things that landed differently in his nervous system than in mine. Temperament is real. Sensitivity is real. Two children in the same house can have categorically different experiences based on factors nobody chose. His pain didn't come from nowhere. But here is also what I know. He needed a story that explains his life. Humans are story-making creatures. We organize our experiences into narratives that tell us who we are and why we are that way. My brother's narrative places the origin of every failure in one childhood dynamic and holds two specific culprits responsible. Our parents, who don't have money, and me, who does. It's a narrative that relieves him of a particular burden, the burden of the 15 adult years and the choices made in them, by tracing everything back to a poisoned root. I understand why he needs that story. I genuinely do. Living at 33 in your parents' house, holding the rubble of 2 college attempts and a dozen jobs, facing down middle age without savings or stability, that is not a comfortable place to stand. Having a reason for it, a real reason, something that preceded your choices and shaped them from the inside, that would be a relief. I'd probably reach for a narrative too. But I cannot fund a narrative that erases me as a person and replaces me with a symbol. I cannot pay to become his origin story. He needed a villain to explain his life. I was convenient, successful enough to pay, close enough to blame. But I'm not his villain. I'm his brother, or was, before he decided brotherhood required a $70,000 payment. Update 4. The Gathering. Last month, there was a gathering at my parents' house, a birthday for my father, turning 62. My brother decided not to come because I would be there. He made this known in advance so my parents could plan around it. I came anyway. My parents looked older than I remembered. Not dramatically, but in the particular way that grief accelerates time on a face. My father's hair has gone fully gray. My mother moves a little more carefully than she used to. They welcomed me warmly, made the dinner I've loved since childhood, and we sat around the table talking about ordinary things. My job, the apartment, the city I've built my small life in. The ordinary surface of a family trying to remain a family. At one point, sitting alone with my father while my mother was in the kitchen, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry for whatever part of this we caused." I didn't know how to carry that. I still don't. I said, "You did your best." "Maybe our best wasn't good enough," he said. For him. He needed something I didn't know how to give. I still don't know what it was. I said, "I don't think you can know that. I think you were people trying to raise children, and one child needed something the other didn't, and you didn't know how to calibrate it. That's not negligence. That's just the limits of what parents can see." He nodded slowly. We sat in the silence that follows something true. I drove home that night thinking about the gap between us, my brother and me, and how it became permanent. Not because of childhood. Childhood was just the origin story we each tell differently. The gap became permanent when he decided that closing it required something I couldn't give. Agreement that his story is the only story. Agreement that I am the cause. Agreement written in money and deed. I couldn't agree. Not because I'm certain he's wrong about every detail of his childhood, but because agreeing would require me to disappear as a person and become a symbol in his narrative. And I am not a symbol. I was a child. I am a person. I built something with my hands and my years and my choices. Resolution. The apartment and the story. The apartment stays mine. I want to say that without triumph, because there's nothing triumphant about this. The apartment is a one-bedroom in a city 3 hours from where I grew up. It has a balcony I use in the summer and a kitchen I've slowly figured out. It represents 5 years of deliberate choices. The cheap apartments, the skipped trips, the overtime hours, the nights eating at home when I wanted to eat out. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody's stolen opportunities built it. My brother's story says otherwise. My brother's story says that the confidence I built my life with was harvested from his psychological destruction, that every achievement I translated into work was funded by parental approval stolen from him, that the apartment is not mine in any clean moral sense because it was built on a foundation paid for with someone else's suffering. I cannot prove that story false. I can only tell you mine. Mine says, I was a kid. I didn't ask to be born second or to become a standard. I didn't design my parents' tired frustrations or their clumsy comparisons. I didn't understand, until I was an adult, that my brother was carrying a wound with my shape. I would have done something differently if I'd known. I don't know what, I was a child, but something. I carry some grief about this that I'm not sure I'll ever fully put down. Not guilt, I've done the work to understand that distinction. But grief. Grief for the brother I remember before this narrative consumed him. Grief for the relationship we don't have. Grief for my parents, caught between their sons, aging in a house where Christmas has to be split between two people who used to share it. My brother's pain is real. His conclusion is wrong. Both of those things are simultaneously true, and they cannot be resolved into a cleaner truth without sacrificing one of them. I refuse to sacrifice either. Some families stay close through everything. Some fracture over money. And some fracture over stories. Stories that one person needs to believe so urgently that they cannot share space with anyone who doesn't believe them too. At my father's birthday dinner, my mother put the same meal on the table she's always made. The dishes she's made for 62 birthdays, for 2 sons and a husband and whoever happened to be in the kitchen. She moves around that kitchen like water around stones. She always has. She made enough for my brother too, I noticed. Force of habit. Or hope. Hard to tell which, in mothers. My brother was at home 3 miles away. I don't know what he ate. Final reflection. My brother says I ruined his psyche by being the kid he was compared to. Says my existence created his depression, his failures, his inability to build a life. Says I owe him $70,000, half my apartment, as compensation for the damage. But I didn't damage him. I was a child in the same house, 6 years younger, trying to survive the same parents. If their parenting hurt him, I'm sorry, genuinely, not performatively. But I didn't design their parenting. I didn't ask for comparisons. I didn't benefit from his suffering. I just had different suffering he couldn't see. He needed a villain to explain his life. I was convenient, successful enough to pay, close enough to blame. But I'm not his villain. I'm his brother, or was, before he decided brotherhood required a $70,000 payment. The apartment stays mine. The story he tells stays his. And somewhere between those two things, we stopped being family. Not because I kept my apartment. Because he decided my entire existence was a debt. You can't be brothers with someone who sees you as an invoice. I tried. He billed. We ended. That's not my fault. That's his narrative. And narratives don't come with automatic payment plans, no matter how sincerely they're believed. I hope he finds something that works. I hope his therapy eventually reaches the part where accountability and healing stop being opposites. I hope he builds something, not because I expect to be part of it, but because I remember who he was before the story consumed him, and that person deserved better than this. He deserved better than the comparisons. He deserved better than tired parents who said thoughtless things. He deserved a childhood that didn't leave him here. He just didn't deserve my apartment. And I didn't deserve to become the reason for everything he couldn't build. That was the part that cost us the most. Not the money, which was never real, but the narrative, which became more real to him than I was. More real than his brother. More real than the kid on the floor of the same house, 6 years behind him, trying to figure out the same world. I was never the standard. I was just his little brother. He forgot that. And I couldn't afford to let him remember it the way he wanted to, at the cost of everything I built by remembering who I was, even when no one was comparing me to anyone.